glad to see you here, to see you so numerous, interested in probably career development or career in the institutions or career with the commission or however you would like, say, career, let's call it full stop, right? Now, my purpose is, first of all, to discuss about career in the institutions. And then obviously, if you have questions about outside the institution, obviously I could go there as well, because what I'm doing for the last 20 years is preparing people in the selection processes. That means selection processes either with, as much as I'm situated in Brussels, obviously with the European institutions, and as well with the European agencies, and as well then with big international, I would say big because they're more multinationals mostly, and then international institutions, international organizations as well across the globe. So that is my, let's say, purpose or scope of the coaching. And obviously a part of it is career development and personal and professional development, which is part of your career, obviously. Now, what I would like to discuss today is, let's say, to organize these career possibilities or opportunities so that, let's hope you will have a clear image. So I start with the youngest of you. We don't know, I don't know where I cannot estimate like this, but I would say some of you could be there, right? So the youngest category are the trainees, right? So you finish your studies and then you apply for the Blue Book trainees. Probably some of you know what I'm talking about, and if not, write it down and go and check, right? The Blue Book trainees is, I would say, quite a good opportunity to start, let's say, looking around what's happening in the institutions and have get a certain feeling of what the work is or what the work is about, right? Now, mostly will be 5 months, which is not the big fuss, but, you know, I say it would be enough in order you to understand what's happening. And if you're lucky, let's say you could have an extension somewhere, so you could have a longer than these 5 months traineeship. Why not, right? And I have a lot of my clients who have started like trainees, and then they were lucky and somebody went on maternity leave and then they were asked to step in, and then they had another small contract, and then they really worked well, and then they were proposed another contract, and so on and so forth, right? So I've seen a lot of these situations. So let's say we should not neglect or disconsider this entry in the institution, even though I would call it, you know, entering by the back door, right? Why not? So that's one possibility. Now, the second possibility, if you started as a trainee, then you could continue if you have less than 3 years work experience, right? So we are talking about really very young people. So if you have less than three years, then you could go for a program that is new. Probably this is only the second year that they are doing, which is called Junior Professional Program, right? Now, Junior Professional Program is less than 3 years professional experience. So that is the condition. And they have a selection process that is quite light. So I prepare now lately, obviously, people for that. So I think that my client had one written and one oral, which is a light, you agree that is a light selection process. And she was successful, and now she is in. And the Junior Professional Program means 2 years of professional, let's say, experience in the institutions, where every 6 months you're offered another job in another DG. So again, very interesting, because you will have quite a good feeling of different DGs. You will have probably 3 of them, and the responsibilities that belong to an AD, that means administrator. So this is first category, very junior, let's say, of you. And now, why is that interesting to do a GPP program, so Junior Professional Program? Because, for example, this time they were allowed to the 85 EPSO, big EPSO competition. And I would say that they have quite a good start in doing the 85 competition. So I would say that's a very good advantage, opportunity. If you enter trainee, then you continue junior professional program, and then you go for a competition. Wow, that's perfect. Good. We turn the page, we move to the next possibility. Now, the next possibility is the institutions. There are jobs in the institution, and obviously I'm starting with the easy, if you want to say easiest, and then we go to something which is a little bit more difficult, which means demands more work. So the first, the easiest, again, a way of saying is the intérimaire contract. Now, intérimaire contract, you go for an agency that does provide intérimaire contracts to people who can work in the institutions, but they are not directly employed by the institutions. They're employed by this interim agency. Nevertheless, I have clients who started like this, and then again, they made themselves known, or they made themselves appreciated. And then they succeeded to get another type of contract, which means a direct contract with the institutions. Now, obviously, I'm not here to talk about how much money you earn in each of the contracts. You know, this information is public, so you could check it by yourself. Nevertheless, obviously, the interim is the lowest paid job, I would say, of all. But, you know, when, how do you say that? When we love, we don't count. So you start with this, and then hopefully you could move to another category. So this is number one, right? Now, number two is contractual. Contractual, as you know, probably, we are moving here to something that is much more common. And the contractual is that first you put yourself in a databases for contractual agents. And then obviously you have to be lucky, so somebody finds you on that, or you applied spontaneously application, and then somebody goes then to pick you from that list. So it's not really obvious, it's not very direct, it's not very, how to say, straightforward. Nevertheless, the contractual agent, the contractual agent is the way, and there are so many, enormous. The numbers are really huge of contractual agents around, which means that there are a lot of contracts around, right? Now, because there are a lot of contracts around, and because these contracts are limited to 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, anyway, they are limited. So maximum is 6. So because there are so many and because they are limited, then I would say there is much more chance than you find a contractual contract, right? Now, the way to select the contractual is very similar with an EPSO, very similar, but obviously not identical, which means that you will have probably a written exercise, you will have certainly an interview, but I would not go more beyond that. Probably they could, sometimes they ask you to do a CBT, right? It's computer-based test as well. But I would say that you have the 3, you will not go beyond the 3, right? So never you get closer to a real EPSO competition. But nevertheless, a CBT can really be there. A written test, case study written test can be there, and obviously an interview. Now, the interview, it's an interview that will be split in 2 parts. One part, which is the soft skills, and another part that is hard skills. So it's like similar to EPSO, but the 2 interviews go together in one. So that is what you could expect if you go for a contractual agent. Now, again, what is the advantage of it is that you can start working, you can show that you are good. You can have up to 6 years contract, but let me be clear, and I suppose that you know it by now, you cannot stay, you cannot become, there is no passerelle in order to go for fonctionnaire permanent job. There is no way, right? So the contractual agent, let's say we use it in order to, how to say, to do the job, to perform the job, hopefully to on one hand reassure yourself that you are good and you do well the job, and hopefully as well to, let's say, to create a professional network. But it's not because you have a professional network then you will get a permanent contract. So we don't mention this, forget about that, there is no way. But nevertheless, it's, you could go up to 6 years of contract, which is not bad. And obviously, what I would say, you have 6 years to prepare the EPSO competitions. And then obviously that is a very good, I would say, arrangement, right? And then preparing the EPSO competition as you are inside, it's a little bit easier because you will see that the leisure time activity in Brussels, the sport in Brussels is the EPSO competitions. So if ever somebody does something in the spare time, it's EPSO competition. So by being inside the institutions or the agencies and having a contractual agent, then you will be together with so many people doing the EPSO competition. So it's kind of, you keep yourself trained, right? Because everybody's training around you. So in that sense, it's a little bit easier to stay motivated into the preparation because you will see all your colleagues are doing the exams, right? So in that sense, the contractual agent is a good, let's say, opportunity. Now, a little bit better than contractual agent is a temporaire, so temporary agent, right? The temporary agent could go up to 5 years, again, 3, 5, 6 maximum. It's better in the sense that it's better paid, right? So it's a higher pay, it pays equally, I think, with a functionaire, with a civil servant, but obviously the contracts are much more let's say, much less common. So there are much less temporary contracts around. And now, for example, there is a competition for temporary agents at the 88 level in IT, right? Which is, I would say, not that tough as an EPSO competition, but you know, quite, it's kind of is getting closer to the difficulty of an EPSO competition. So you see, every time when you think about the selection process, the selection process is less complicated or less difficult if the job gives you 1 year or 2 years or so, and becomes obviously very difficult, like the full EPSO competition, if you go for the life employment. And it looks to me very obvious, right? So when you are looking for temporary, it's a contract of 5 years. So it's more difficult than a contractual, let's say, the selection process. Nevertheless, it is not that difficult as a full EPSO, let's say for an 88. Nevertheless, you will have then a 5 years temporary contract. I mean, but as I said, this is more rare, and this is the first time that I heard about the temporary organized openly, right? Normally, the temporary contracts are, let's say, kind of invisible selections that we don't necessarily face them. This is the first time that I had clients who were called, let's say, from across Europe. That means very open competition for the 88 for a temporary contract. So is that an exception, or does it mean that this is a new tendency? Well, let's hope for you that is a new tendency. which means that we open the temporary, let's say, which is a well-paid 5 years contract, to in an open, transparent, let's say, competition. So let's hope that this is the tendency that I observe and not the exception, because in the past the temporary contracts were quite limited, and their selection process was, I would say, quite invisible. Now it looks better. And then obviously we go now to the cherry on the cake, which is the functionaire, the civil servant contract. This is life employment. And then in order to get that, obviously we are talking about the EPSO competition. Now, EPSO competition is organized for, I would say, AST, for a number of AST. Well, normally they are AST SC, then AST 1s, the AST 3, then AST 4s. There are different levels, so let's call them assistant level, and then there is administrator level. And these competitions are the big EPSO competitions that everybody in Brussels is preparing. Now, and they take about 1 year, but lately, obviously, with COVID, they were competitions that took 2 years to be completed. In any case, you have to count at least 1 year from the application form to the end of the competition, let's say the reserve list. So it's a long competition. During this competition, there are several phases, obviously. We are starting with the application form, and then we go for a CBT normally, which is computer-based test, verbal, numerical, and abstract. Then sometimes we could have an e-tray, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we could have MCQs in the domain of competence, sometimes we don't. And then we have the assessment center, where you have normally 4 or 5 tests in the assessment center, and the 5, let's say, could be a written test, which could be written test, case study, or the combination of 2. This is one. Then you could have oral presentation, could be a second. Then you could have an interview in general competencies, and you could have another interview in the specific competencies of the domain of expertise. And then you have something that in the past was called group exercise, whilst now it's called situational CBI. That means situational competence-based interview, right? So let's say 5 tests, 6 maximum, depending on the competitions, that will take place. In the past, let's say, they used to have it in 1 day. So you went in the morning, 8:30, and then in the evening you finish with your assessment center. Now, the last one that I'm preparing my clients for is a DEFCO competition, and they have each exam, so they will have 4, and each exam is in 2 months. Now, 2 months is this, then another next 2 months is that one, and so on and so forth. So it might be that because of the COVID, they were not prepared to organize it, and this is the way that they succeeded to, let's say, put it forward. Or can it be that they changed the style? We don't know yet. So in any case, talking about the big EPSO competition, to have a broad picture is to say that it's at least 1 year, and then you have to stay focused on the 1 year of preparing, going through these tests, because obviously every point counts. So you are trying to get the maximum score in every single test you get. And hopefully at the end you will be on the reserve list, and then we go to find a job, because it's not enough to have to be on the reserve list, but then next step will be to get a position, and hopefully then in that position you do well, and by doing well then you are confirmed as civil servant. So it's not automatic, right? So you have a, right. So, well, I would say with that, I could finish with at the competition. And now I'm going for the third possibility, which is obviously very reduced, but just in case so that you know it exists, is the seconded national expert, right? Now, seconded national expert, the condition is that you are a civil servant in a member state. And by being civil servant in a member state, your administration agrees that you come in the commission to work. And so your administration is it continues to pay you the salary, whilst the commission is paying you a per diem. And what is the advantage? The conception, let's say, of the seconded national expert was that the people from the national administrations, by working in the commission, they learn how the commission works, or they learn new things so that they then go back to, let's say, introduce them in the national administration. The number of years for contract, I think it's about 2 + 2, something like that. So if you get to 4, I think it's kind of the maximum of the seconded. And again, I have clients who, being in seconded national experts, obviously they were trying to pass the EPSO competitions. But as I said, it's a very specific type of contract, and the condition is to be a public servant already in one of the member states. Good, and then I'm going to the last one, which are the contracts in the agencies. Now, in the agencies, the selection process, what we call them contractual agents in the beginning, and the selection process is, let's say, easier, obviously, than the big competition, the big EPSO, because it's a selection process for a contractual agent. Having said so, the characteristic of the agency is that that depends on the agency. You could have 5 + 5 indefinite, you could have 3 + 3 indefinite. So in any case, the advantage of the agency is that you are in the, after a number of years, if they extend your contract, it might be that the third time, let's say, you will become, you will have indefinite contract, right? So what is interesting in the agencies is that you will have indefinite contract, which, let's say, is life employment, right? Even though the selection process was not, let's say, that difficult as EPSO. Now, having said so, if you talk with the people from the agency, they will say the contrary. They will say that their selection process was very serious. Now, I'm preparing, and the EPSO, I'm preparing, and the agency, I'm preparing everybody around the process. So I would say, indeed, it's difficult. Nevertheless, has less, this the selection process for the agency, it has less tests than an EPSO test. So at least in that perspective, it's a little bit easier, at least in that perspective. And at the end, you find yourself with an indefinite contract. But there is a but in the agency, which is, for the moment, which is that you cannot leave the agency, right? And so this is the frustration of some of my clients, that they have indefinite contracts, so they are very happy that, let's say, they have life employment. Nevertheless, after 3 years or 5 years, they would like to move, they would like to go to another institution, or they would like to do another job, but they are married with the agency. So in that respect, there is obviously, it's a reassurance that you, in an agency, you have a life employment. Nevertheless, if then you have, let's say, hopes and dreams for career development, it's a little bit limited. And that is why some of my clients, despite having indefinite contracts, they come back to prepare the EPSO competition because they would like to have more freedom in the choice that they are making in their career. So, right. And I think with this, I did, give you an overview of the jobs or positions or selection processes here. Now, to conclude with how I could help you in all this, let's start by saying that the definition of the job I'm doing is accompanying your professional life, right? Now, when I say accompanying the professional life, means that we start with the application forms, right? So we write together the CV, we write together the 4 questions of the application. You remember the motivation questions. We write together the talent screener if you go for a competition where there is a talent screener to be written. So there are 3 documents or motivation letter, for example. And so these documents, we write them together to be sure that they reflect the best we can who you are. And obviously, hopefully, if you have a high quality document, let's imagine that you attract whatever jury or selector or HR who will see your documents. So this is the first thing that we can do, that I do with my clients. Now, the second thing is the CBT, the famous CBT. So we are talking about verbal, numerical, and abstract reasoning, and I hope you to get a method in that, and then hopefully, thanks to that method, you're able to do it, to do the exercises much quicker, much better. You understand what you're doing, you understand how to do them. So obviously that's, let's say it's a plus, it's a bonus. So these are the CBTs. Then next stage, as I said, it's either E-tray, so we prepare the E-tray together, or you could have an MCQ, which is a multiple choice questions in the domain of competence. And then what we are doing together for this is to go through the way that you revise your substance knowledge in order then to be able to respond in an MCQ test. So, for example, on Saturday, I have an MCQ with having in mind then an 85 law competition. So the purpose is to show them how to revise the material so that they are able to respond to the MCQ for the EPSO exam. So this is the preliminary test, we could say, and now we go to the assessment center. And again, in the assessment center, I prepare the written test / case study. And then again, you get a method. We do exercise together in order to be sure that you understand how to apply the method. And then you go on the practice. For example, I'm now in this moment with a lot of clients from DEFCO, because they will have the written test in September. So this is the moment where I do with them the written test just before the holiday. So then they have the time to practice during the holiday, and hopefully they will practice because in September is the serious, let's say, is the serious moment when they will have to do the written test. So this is the written test. Then there are competitions, not all of them, that have oral presentations. So again, what I give you, it's a method. How do you process the documents? Because sometimes the oral presentation comes with documents to be read, to be understood, and then to be processed, so that you do an oral presentation based on these documents. So it's a how to say, it's a whole method, it's a whole procedure how to read and to integrate the information. And then it's the structure of the oral presentation, then is the performance of the oral presentation per se. And all these we cover during the training or coaching program. So oral presentation, then we have, as I said before, I do prepare you for the interviews. Now, let's say the interviews for the assessment center, there are two, either or both. So it's a competence-based interview, which means that we go through the 8 EPSO competencies. Normally there are 8 for the AD 5 or 7 or 8. So 8 EPSO competencies, and what we do is to create examples so that you can demonstrate with your examples that you do have the competencies. So that is the, let's say, the difficulty is first to understand the competence, and then to understand how to choose the examples so that you illustrate that competence. And then once we have, let's say, a positive example and then a negative example, then we are done. And obviously you have to create as many examples as you can, because the purpose of the interview is obviously to question you. And obviously what they would like to see is that you have a lot of examples to serve, and hopefully therefore you demonstrate that you have the competencies thanks to the number of examples that you prepared and you could, let's say, present in the interview. So this is the general competencies. And then if it is a expert exam, so for example, there is now an 86 in agriculture, or there is an 86 in chemicals, or there is a DEFCO 87, or external relations an 87 as well. So as soon as we go to 86, 7, 8, that means that they consider, or they would like obviously to recruit experts, and then they will have a specific interview in the domain of competence. And then in that situation, what we do is to prepare examples on the professional experience, on the expertise, and not anymore on the EPSO competencies. You see, so let's say in one sense it's very similar because we still prepare examples, but they are different because the purpose, the focus of these examples is to display, to talk about, to detail your expertise in that specific domain, which is obviously the expertise that you claim you have when you apply to the competition. So these are the two interviews. And then there is this famous situational competence-based interview, SCBI. And there we go again together through the method, how you process the file, because you will have a file more or less big, depends. So how you process the file, how you organize the material, and how then you learn the material so that you are able to sustain that interview, which probably will be quite, I say, musclé. It's quite difficult or tough, obviously challenging, because the purpose is to see whether you really understood the file and you're able to handle the consequences of that file. So that is to say that I do as well training as coaching, individual coaching in all these phases of the competition and selection process. And then as soon as you're on the reserve list, we still continue to work, because then we have to prepare the interview to hopefully to be selected. And then once you are in the job, we continue the coaching in because you would like to perform well and you would like to be confirmed, isn't that, in the new position. And if you pass the probational period, then you are confirmed as a civil servant. And then, well, my clients continue to coaching in professional development, because probably then they would like to become head of sector, or they would like to become a head of unit, or they would like to change jobs, or they would like to go in a delegation, and so on and so forth. So there is always something happening in your professional life, and therefore, I could support you in these changes, development, or challenges that, come up in your professional life. I think with that, I finished what I wanted absolutely to give to you this afternoon. And if you have questions or comments, obviously. Yes, I see Eftimia said that executive agency, decentralized agency, yes, it's the process is very similar to the both, so it doesn't matter. The difference, I would say, would be, obviously you have to check their website between the years in the contract or the condition or so, but the selection process is very similar. So, questions, clarifications?
Can I jump in for?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, yes, for 1 second. Just to clarify, because actually what the question was about, about the executive and the decentralized agencies, because you mentioned that once you are recruited in an agency, it's difficult to get out, or it's for that point, I needed the clarification. Did you mean the decentralized ones, or just for the executive ones?
I would say you have to check what certainly you'll find information on their website. What I know from my clients is that there is, the rules are different, but in theory, you move from determined to indefinite, or definite to indefinite in some number of years. And obviously if you are good and if you are serious enough and they want to keep you and so on. But
okay.
I would say I'm not going to give you the list of where and what. My thought was rather about the selection process that is very similar, but then the condition for employment, then obviously you find them on their internet.
Okay, thank you.
The difference, I would say, that then once you are there, as I said, the frustration of some of my clients is that they cannot move, right? So you see, I prepared them to get that job, and they were very happy in the beginning, but then with the time they got frustrated because, okay, it's 5 years and 6 years and so, and then they would like to do something else. So then what they have done is they come back to do a big EPSO competition in order to have the freedom to move. But obviously you could start somewhere and then you will see how you do from there.
Thank you. And you provide preparation for interviews. I mean, do you distinguish the procedure between the EPSO competitions and the agencies? Or?
Well, I would say, yes, there is a difference, but the difference is not that huge. Obviously, if I know, for example, tomorrow I'll have somebody, then if I know that you have one interview, then in that interview, I will put together and soft skills and hard skills, because you will have only one interview. But if you do an EPSO competition, then I know that now you will have 1 hour interview on CBI, that means competence-based, and then you have another 1 hour interview in the expertise. Makes sense? So obviously we'll do different preparations, but the difference is more on the quantity of questions that we prepare for one, whilst in the other one they go together. Alexandre asked what will happen with 85? Well, my dear, I'm not a medium. I do have some abilities, but I'm not sure that I'm good enough to see that. But I would say that, yes, they part of the EPSO competitions. Now, sometimes it happens that they don't do it, but because they are now still in the competition of the 85. As I said, I have some of my clients who have done the junior professional program and now they are doing the 85. So it's not yet finished. So probably that's a way to, let's say, to decide differently, but I cannot imagine that they will drop the 85 competitions. I cannot imagine. Having said so, if you are still young, less than 3 years professional experience, probably a good point would be to apply for the junior professional programs, which then it's already a good way, or say, step in the door, foot in the door. Good. So apparently everything is clear. The only thing I could do is to invite you to our trainings. Normally, we organize every Saturday and every Sunday trainings that respond to all kind of competitions and all kind of moments of the selection process. And as well, individual sessions when let's say the training does not respond perfectly to your needs, and then obviously a better way to do is to go for the individual sessions. When with that, I thank you for the presence, for your attention, and I hope to see you soon.